afternoon. This is Rebecca. How may I help you?
Hey, it's Miller.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I am glad it's Friday. I am doing well.
I'm also glad that it's Friday. So I appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk with me.
Sure thing. So tell me about this project.
So it is a podcast that we are recording for class, and it's supposed to be about any topic of importance to us. And
Okay,
of course, working over at the YWCA, I think that social work is very important. So I thought, there's
very
nobody
cool.
nobody better to talk to than the queen of social work.
Ah, thank you.
Of
So is this
course.
something that the actual podcast is you're doing, or is that what this is?
So yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I am gonna just have a little microphone set up next to the phone for us to talk, and
Oh,
we
okay.
we'll just get into a little bit of your background and
Uh huh.
little bit of what you do over at the Y and kind of what the mission is and all that fun stuff.
Sounds great.
So, if you don't mind telling me just a little bit, about your background, a little bit about, kind of how you got into social work, and we'll go from there.
Sure, absolutely. So, I went to Davidson undergraduate. They have a big component for all students there about commitment to service, and I don't know whether they attract people that are interested in that or cultivate it for those that go there, or probably a little bit of both. But I definitely knew early on I wanted to engage in some kind of aspect of community service, and wanted to do some work with nonprofits, but wasn't exactly sure what. I landed at the YW through just the Davidson Alum Network. Kirsten, our executive director, is a Davidson graduate as well, as is Sarah, who's in our philanthropy department. Shameless Davidson plug there. And so when I started here, I was working with the Women in Transition program, loved the work, loved the mission, eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. It's hard not to love that mission for sure.
Exactly.
And early on, Kirsten, when I joined, they were in the process of developing housing for families, which was based on the success of the Women in Transition program. And so was able to come on board at a time where could help with some of that planning and development, and then directed that program for 4 years. So between both programs, we've got 80 to 100 people who may be living on this campus on a given time who are experiencing homelessness. And while I was in that role as director of Families Together, realized I wanted to explore some clinical training, and that much of this population is dealing with mental health issues, which do not discriminate. They are in every income bracket and every race, but of course, when you have limited access to resources or are denied those resources because of prejudice or racism, then it certainly impacts your ability to function. So that became something that I wanted to study further, and was looking at clinical community psychology degrees and social work, and really just kind of landed with social work because of the emphasis on the impact of external variables that create that impact our behaviors and overall well-being, as well as internal variables. So you have everything from, like I was talking about before, access to healthcare, oppression, support systems, as well as biology, genes, things like that are impacting all of our lives and overall well-being. And social work seems, it is a degree that focuses on all of those factors and how to incorporate all of those factors into how you approach situations and problem solve with individuals for betterment and improved quality of life. So I decided to go back to school, went to UNCC's MSW program, had an internship on inpatient behavioral health unit at Kings Mountain Hospital. And then that was my first year. And then the second year, I interned with the VA's military sexual trauma program, doing individual and group therapy. And because the VA has just so many different clinical options bounced around, like that military sexual trauma was my home base internship. And then I could, go look at the homeless veterans program and go look at the traumatic brain injury program and shadow a variety of programs there, which was phenomenal. And fell in love with that. Worked there for 4 years, and then Kirsten, executive director of the YW, reached out about this current position, and it was too good to pass up. This is an organization, this is my family. So I came home about 2.5 years ago and have been in this role since.
That's awesome. And, I think the big thing that strikes a lot of people about social work is the element of community, that you're reaching out to your own community or the community that you're currently living in and helping within that community. I think that you see the immediate impact in society because you're living in that community that you're helping. I think that's the thing that, attracts so many people to social work.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could just give me a little bit of a kind of a rundown of, what the Y does, what type of programs we have over there, and what it might look like for someone that, is trying to come into that program as a, single lady or maybe a lady with a family.
Sure. We have 4 different programs of service at the YWCA. First off, we have a co-ed fitness facility, which you know a lot about and work with. It's open to the public. We're the best gym in Charlotte.
Yes.
We also have, our largest program is our Department of Youth programs. We have 8 different fully funded, academically based after-school centers that are scattered throughout Mecklenburg and Union County. These centers, we partner with a lot of Parks and Rec, a lot of Inlivian, which is formerly Charlotte Housing Authority, a lot of low-income neighborhoods to provide this academically based after-school safe place for children to be after school in the evenings. And the big push for those programs is literacy. We have one of those programs at our Park Road campus, which we actually opened when we opened the Families Together program, which I'll talk about next. But that is originally was for Families Together students, and now is kind of open to the nearby community. But yeah, those 8 different youth learning centers are offering that programming after school for elementary aged kids. So those are 2 of our programs, and then we have 2 transitional housing programs. So we have Women in Transition, which is the program that I run. It is transitional housing for adult unaccompanied women. So we cannot accommodate children in this program. And it is for adult women who are experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. So they might be at the emergency shelter, they might be living on the streets, they might be in an abusive relationship and housed but needing to exit that relationship for safety reasons. And then our other housing program is the Families Together program, which is transitional housing for homeless families with minor children. So we have 10 townhomes on site in addition to a 66-room facility for adult women. So when I say, we can have, right now we have, I think, 70 or 80 individuals living on our campus in addition to a gym and fitness center open to the public and our after-school center. So there's lots of really cool things happening on property. As for transitional housing, the biggest thing that we stress is that it's not just housing. It is a program. And individuals in both programs are paying nominal monthly rental fees and establishing some rental history. And they're working one-on-one with one of our on-site case managers to go through our budgeting curriculum and to work towards permanent housing. And we really meet every individual, every family where she and they are. And that's another component of social work that's just really important, is kind of finding out where individuals are, not doing for, but meeting individuals and helping them build what they want. So that is a critical component of the case management and the work that we're doing in both programs, looking at housing history, looking at where they want to be, looking at how they can help maybe change from that job that's just barely paying the bills to a career that they're invested in and that they can make more money at and excel at. So those case management meetings, participants are meeting one-on-one with each of our on-site case managers at least once every couple weeks, looking at every penny that's coming in their budget, every penny that's going out, pulling credit report. We are not here to tell people how to spend their money, but we are putting a magnifying glass on it so that they can ideally establish a certain amount that they can save. Participants in both of our programs have limited income, so we're serving population that earns below 50% area median income, which is right now in Mecklenburg County, $29,300. So when you think about $29,300 as an annual salary and fair market rent, which can be $900 to $1,000 for individuals on the lower end of that spectrum, like 30, 20% area median income that get maybe $700 a month, there's no possible way they can afford even the affordable housing, right, in Charlotte. And so part of their coming here is so that they have a place to be for a year and a half where they can know their affordable rent, live in a safe spot, and then work on saving money, connecting to other resources so that they're leaving here into permanent housing and sustaining that.
And
our referrals come... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment about the fact that, it's interesting to see, because I've spoken with many of the ladies who are upstairs, and, they talk about how expensive Charlotte has gotten, in the last few years, and how, maybe 20 years ago, making that much money would have put them in a pretty comfortable housing situation.
Right.
And, that's just a product of the city expanding so rapidly. And, I think that one of the big things that you talked about is the fact that you're not only giving them, a place to stay that they can afford, but also educating them about, how to keep track of their money and how to, kind of game plan going forward. I think that a lot of people don't understand that that's a part of what you guys offer over there, and I think that that's so critical.
Absolutely. That is the meat and potatoes of what we do. We say all the time, and when individuals come for their intake interview, this is not just housing, this is a program. But that means that individuals have to be willing to engage in that. Some people are just looking for housing, and going through a budget, that's invasive. Like, you and I don't have people looking at our receipts and potentially judging or feeling like they're judging us on what we spend our money on, and that can be really hard.
Yeah.
And to your point, though, about affordability in Charlotte, I started with the YW in 2005, and we would get calls from people in other states saying, I'm homeless in New York, but I hear Charlotte's affordable and I want to come there. And we'd be like, no, don't come unless you have a housing plan. We don't have enough housing for the people here. And that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But when you think about fair market rent, that's gone up, but our minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. So there's a lot of variables impacting this affordable housing crisis, where individuals, how many full-time jobs do you have to afford an apartment in Charlotte or a house in Charlotte for a family of 4, 3, even for an individual? The math doesn't add up. And so we need things like increased minimum wage. We need things like access to resources, better transportation for individuals who need to be able to get to better paying jobs. There's just a lot of different variables that play into that.
I agree completely. And, you see that a lot in these big cities. The last thing that I really wanted to just ask you about was kind of, I know that, in some cases you might have people coming to you in situations where they may have had a addiction of some form at some point. Mm-hmm. And I know that plays into, possibly their situation that they're currently faced with. And I was just kind of wondering how, as the YWCA, how do you manage those types of people and helping them along, maybe conversationally, or trying to put them on a regimen in terms of attending meetings, or what do you do in terms of trying to keep former addicts on the road to recovery?
Yeah. Well, one thing to clarify with substance use disorder, it is a disease and it is something that is chronic. It's lifelong. So, an individual who has an addiction, that is something that they are working on every single day, even when they're in recovery, even when they're in remission. If it's been 10, 15 years, it is something that is still can be an active part of their daily work.
Mm-hmm.
And our intake interviews on the front end are so critical because not only are we setting the tone for this is our mission, this is how we approach things, but we're talking about our expectations. And we're also looking at some of their history. That includes drug and alcohol, any use, whether it's social or whether they are in recovery. It includes mental health, it includes medical. And so from that very first meeting, before they're even in the program, we're kind of putting together a plan so that there are the appropriate supports in place for whatever is needed. And then throughout their time here, we're really focused on that relationship. Rapport is huge. One of my favorite quotes is, "No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship." And so we are respectful, we are strengths-based, we are working on empowering and building on the strengths that people come to the table with, so that as they sit down and say, okay, I stopped using 30 days ago and I'm in this treatment program, we can help communicate with that treatment program, work together so that we're not duplicating services, but that we're all on the same, singing from the same hymnal, really, as we support that individual and that woman. And relapse is a part of a recovery. Our program, it is a dry program. We do random drug screens. We do room inspections. These are all things we talk about on the front end. So when a woman is approved and chooses whether or not to participate in our program, she's aware that, okay, this is something that's going to happen on a regular basis. But with recovery, we're working with those individuals on setting themselves up for success. So removing themselves from the people, places, and things that are triggers for their use. For everyone, that use is filling a need at that point in time. And so the key is identifying coping skills and other resources that can address the root cause for what that use is. And that's just kind of a part of the journey that they're working on with their case manager, and their case manager is helping to tease out. So it's a mix of like specific structure that we have in place, like it being a no visitation policy, us having that, and us doing drug screens, and us working with each woman on setting up a recovery plan and connecting her with treatment. And then it's also just the way we approach those conversations and build people up and lead with respect and focus on the strengths that they have that they can combat that illness with.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit on it perfectly in terms of, just trying to work with them, because so many times you see people in these scenarios and it really just isn't their fault, and I think that, I think a lot of times that people just assume that, they've made the conscious decision or they've made the conscious choice to not try, and I think that that's just so misleading because, we have a bunch of wonderful ladies at the YWCA who really just had life hit them way harder than it hits other people. And I think that, having this conversation and being able to bring light to it is, one of the important steps, so more people can realize, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than what one might realize.
Absolutely. The majority of the women that live here are working. They have jobs. They have sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. They just, like I talked about before with minimum wage, they're just not perhaps making enough, not being paid enough, and working 40 to 60 hours a week. I mean, they're busy and they're on the bus. And so that adds, sometimes 2 hours to their commute every day, even just working within Charlotte city limits.
Yeah.
And then when you factor in just oppression and variables, racism impact on home ownership. And we know first home loans started in the early 60s and less than 1% went to men of color. And fast forward 60 years and We know whether or not our parents own a home is a direct correlation on likelihood of us graduating college or likelihood of us having high blood pressure and owning a home ourselves. And so there's a lot of systemic factors that individuals in marginalized populations are dealing with that those of us that are privileged can turn a blind eye to because we don't have to see it. It's not thrown in our faces every day. All the more reason for us to be allies, though, and help advocate for positive change. And organizations like the YWCA are really working to try and do that.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Absolutely.
Thanks
for your interest and for reaching out.
Of course. And, like I said 100 times, it's stuff like this that makes me very happy to be a part of the Y. And, I'm looking forward to continuing the partnership over there. And I really thank you for taking a few minutes to talk about it.
Excellent. We're so glad to have you on the team, Miller. You have a great afternoon.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye.